Welcome to another edition of the SSE Forum Live. I'm John Spiegel. I'm joined by my SSE brother from another mother, Jay Tilson.
That was a good one. I like that one.
You do? All right, cool. So, hey, Jay, are you packed and ready to go for RSA?
Actually, funnily enough, yeah, I generally pack last minute, but this week's been hectic, or in fact, the last few weeks have been hectic, flying and visits to customers and prospects, etc. So yes, I am packed because I actually fly on Saturday.
I haven't done anything. I haven't packed. I haven't thought of it. I haven't even looked at the weather. So I'm not sure if it's going to rain, if it's going to be sunny, or we're even going to see a bridge or what's going to happen. So I think I will probably start that process on Saturday. What do you think about that?
To be honest, what I'm super excited about is actually seeing you in person again. It's been since Black Hat, right, last year. So
I believe so. Yeah. You don't invite me over to the UK.
Well, I have, but it's not easy.
What do you mean it's not easy? Come on now. So what have you been up to outside of men all over on a plane, in a tube, in a train, a car, you name the form of transportation all over Europe? What's been going on?
I think the things top of mind is was at an IDC event recently in Portugal. So my first time in Lisbon, talking about the risks of VPN and VPN replacement. And then I was at an event in London, again, talking about VPN replacement. I think so. That's with everything we see in the press at the moment. I think that's a lot of top of mind for people. So generally doing that, obviously doing some SSE podcast recordings. Again, we've got some new stuff coming out. Planning for RSA. Obviously, we've managed to convince Chase Cunningham to walk around in a wrestler's outfit for charity. So we'll drop that link in the chat. But yeah, just generally prepping. The next couple of weeks for me are crazy. I've got an event, obviously, at RSA. Then I've got an event in Vienna the week after. And then I'm going on vacation to Vietnam for a couple of weeks. And then it's InfoSec in the UK. So pretty much back-to-back travel for the next 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, similar with me. I've got, obviously, RSA. So that's going to be an exciting event, as always. And then it's just flying around the U.S., Gartner events, different speaking engagements at CISO conferences, and meeting with customers, meeting with prospects, and those sorts of things. It's going to be a mad rush, probably until midsummer. And then, we also have our own, because we have to pay the bills, HPE Discover, which is in June. That's going to be another exciting event. So good times, very exciting. And you are right. There is so much news around legacy hardware VPNs. Several of the major big box security vendors have had some significant CVEs out there. One was rated a 10, which is you either turn it off or patch it now type of situation. So hopefully, people are starting to get the news and getting the ideas that legacy boxes that provide single services that are chained to other boxes for security purposes just isn't the way of the future. It's really delivering security from the cloud using zero trust principles. That's where we need to see folks moving, and it's still, my opinion, still early adopters that are moving in that direction. And so we got a significant amount of work to do over the next few years.
Yeah, I think, like I said, and like you've just said, there's a lot of stuff in the press about legacy VPNs, and I think a year ago when I was having conversations around SSE and SASE and ZTNA, people didn't even know necessarily what the terms were. I was going to events and it was more of an explanation of what these are, how they can fit in with your business, how they can make you be more efficient, how they can help you be more secure. Now, before I even get a chance to get up on the stage or before I even kind of start talking, people are asking questions. So it is something that the tide is shifting for sure. And I think it's going to get worse. I mean, VPNs are under attack a lot. I think we will see more pressure on them. And hopefully the tide's turning. People can see that ZTNA and Zero Trust are kind of where we should be heading.
Well, I think it leads into the conversation that we're going to have, and this is a debate going on within the industry around platforms, portfolios, in the classic best of breed defense. The old solutions really, you had a VPN and then you chained a bunch of security devices and network acceleration devices together. That worked when your applications lived in the data center, when your employees lived within the four walls of the enterprise or the corporation. That has changed. We now live in a distributed world. Data is resident in all four corners of the internet. Workers are now as well living and working from their kitchen tables and their garages, from home, from cafes. It's a distributed world, and how you secure that, how you overcome the challenges associated with that, multiple vendors, cost, integration challenges, having to know multiple UIs. Just think about when an application breaks, what do you have to bring together under this legacy model? You've got to bring a network engineer, security engineer, identity engineer, application engineer, operations team, maybe a desktop team. And that's one of the areas that this concept called platforms is really targeting. So why don't we start to move into that topic and bring on our guests?
Let's do that.
Oh, the insightful crew here. Eugenev Karem, if you don't know him, he is absolutely amazing. Podcaster, cybersecurity expert, awesome outdoorsman, and all around good guy. And Roy, looking forward to seeing you next week in San Francisco.
Yep. Likewise. Looking forward to it as well. I think
Awesome.
everyone's going to be there, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think this whole crew is going to be there, and we've got a few events that we're going to be doing, and some fundraising as well with Chase Cunningham. But before we start to dive into that, let's hit on the topic of the day. This big debate around platforms and the consolidation that we're going to be seeing. RSA may not be the reflection of that, or maybe it will be. Maybe that will be a topic because we still are seeing lots and lots of startups in the space. But how people are looking to acquire security tools is starting to change. There's a study I read the other day, 76 discrete security tools in the average enterprise. That's a lot. And one of the topics that Evgeny and I've discussed in the past is how many of these are actually in production, providing useful utility to the business versus being shelfware. What is this resonating with folks that you're talking to, that there is a need to start to move to limit your vendor landscape, start to move to more of a consolidation model? And what does that look like?
Well, there's a couple of problems, so you may start if it's okay. Like, first of all, we all cry about how many or how less of the people we have in our teams. So we always need more people. So if you just take this part, as an average person, how many tools she can log in a day? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20? There's probably 5 or 6 I can log in, but it's going to be impossible to log into all the tools every day to understand what's happening. Also, we have a lot of cross-platform, let's call them security controls. It could be malware, it could be DLP, it could be other policies. Is this mean I need to replicate every time I need to create a policy across many different tools? It's probably going to be hard. I'm going to probably make mistakes eventually. So there is also not just the amount of tools. It's just basically human being concept of being productive at work. I think this is one part. But we have this idea of one pane of glass, not from yesterday, from like last 18 years. This is why we started with IPS, VPN, URL filtering, something else, and then moved to firewalls and next generation firewall. We combined all in one tool because it makes sense from a technology perspective and from a human being perspective. And we see this in the cloud as well. We see this with SaaS and SSE. We want people to be productive and not running between multiple things. Having said this, you always potentially going to have a special tool. Like if you are a carpenter, you have a favorite knife or favorite hammer. This is the best hammer, and this is the one you want. So there is place for both of them, depend who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I would agree with Gavney. I think the challenge that we're seeing is that the longer you run IT infrastructure for, the more tools and diversity you're going to have because of that long tail problem, right? And depending on how long that tail you have, there are probably security products that you had to have for that particular era of technology at that point in time that is stuck with that IT. I mean, you can't decommission it because there is an application running on that OS or that platform that still exists. And so I think there's this carry along. Now, over time, what we do see with the vendors is that to the extent that they can wrap these things, right? So you'll see these wrapper approaches, right? What's DLP? It's a wrapper approach. What's CASB? That's a horrible wrapper, right? I mean, fundamentally, because you don't have consistent policies across, and you're like, okay, well, maybe now we do API-based CASB, which is not as bad a wrapper because you're not trying to figure out and reverse engineer every new version of Salesforce and Box and Dropbox, right? In terms of the path and the URL. But fundamentally, I think there is going to be some diversity in security tools just because of the nature of what they do, which is protect the platforms and the applications at every era, right? And then to the extent that vendors can roll them up or wrap them up, I think there is value there. And I think we're seeing that with like things like Zero Trust, which is fundamentally they all talk over some protocol, right? And we did that with the LP, right? And you inspect, TCP. Then you realize you only have to inspect, HTTPS, right? Now you just HTTPS, and over TCP, over quick, whatever it is. And to the extent that you can lock it at the network level, you can wrap some legacy things. But again, the amount of intelligence that you have in that is always going to be tricky when you're looking at the network level, and you're always going to be trying to DPI your way through stuff and man in the middle attacking yourself in your own TLS infrastructure to try to get at the content, right? And that's kind of a weird situation I agree. I think we're getting fatigued in terms of you can only swivel so many times before you get dizzy, right? In terms of managing all your security, panes of glass. But I think there's always going to be some level of diversity in there. I think it'll be reduced. We want it reduced, but there's always going to be a long tail.
I like what you were saying, and I think you're right. We're not very good at decommissioning old stuff or migrating away from legacy tools. Maybe because I hadn't thought of that before. Well, I kind of had, but not in the way you expressed it. Maybe we just need to get better at removing that legacy stuff, because when you buy security tools or any technology tool, really, because we don't need to necessarily talk about security, you always have to look at how is it going to deal with those legacy things you've still got in place. Maybe we just need to get better at removing them. And I mean, I'm sure we've all been trying to do that for I don't know how long. And somebody always wants to hang on to it, or it's got data on that you don't quite understand, or you need to keep that manufacturing machinery just in case you need to make that part. I wonder if we somehow just need to get better at staying more up to date, because patching is imperative as well. And a lot of the times we don't do that because of things like a lot of times we have tools that you can't patch because they're so out of date, and therefore you end up with this sprawl. And it reminds me a little bit of what happened when VMware first came along. It was like, now I have the ability of just creating a machine like that. I don't need to buy hardware, and suddenly, boom, you have all these things. Yevgeny, I don't know if you were...
Yes. I was just throwing in my head, and you mentioned VMware, and it just dropped. Like, think about that. We say, okay, you know what? If you buy a vendor approach as a package, it's amazing. You have one dashboard, one logging, you have a lot of amazing things. But we have this strange idea of vendor having the customer hostage, because now they cannot move away. we're not talking about technology right now. We're talking about human being. The vendor understands that the customer cannot really move to another vendor. It will be very hard. So they can bump the price and just drop VMware. We know that a lot of customers have an issue with VMware because nobody cares about them right now.
Well,
So now I'll be quiet.
Yeah, no,
I was going to say VMware starts off as a hypervisor, adds in storage, vSAN, adds in networking through NSX, adds in SD-WAN through the VeloCloud acquisition, stitches all of this together. It's essentially your IT platform in a box. And I'm not even getting into some of the Kubernetes aspects that they have or cross cloud. This is kind of the model.
Yeah, it's a private cloud,
model.
hybrid cloud. That's the model they're trying to do. And I think I wanted to go back to what Jay said, which is I think that there is something really important there, which is planned obsolescence. And that's a concept that we had sometime along the way with IT, but I don't think we've executed that well from a planned obsolescence standpoint. And we're not very good, generally speaking, at planning for maintenance, right? We're not very good at planning for obsolescence and working that in. We're not good at a financial planning level from a CFO office to say, look, I'm deploying this technology. What's the lifespan? Well, it's really 5 years. All right, great. What's the plan at the third year or the fourth year? What are you going to do, right? How are you going to do it and what? And we see that across the board, across all infrastructure. It's not just IT. It's the highways. It's our railways. It's our planes, right? And I think fundamentally those best practices from a planning, management, and even a financial planning, because that's where it comes to play, because you have to put the investment in place. And we're just not very good as humans at that, as it's clear. Now, I don't know when the AIs take over, whether they'll be better than we are, but we'll see. Right?
Well, I'd like to give credit to somebody, because I'm going to repeat what they said. So I happened to be in Lisbon recently, and Greg Vandergast, who I know many of you know, is a friend of mine and a friend of the show, was doing a talk, and he basically said that you've got technology people buying security tools, not really security people, but technology people. And technology people love technology. So we like to buy new technology and play with new technology. So he was basically saying that we tend to buy because we like to. And that's we like shiny lights, we like new tools. And I've managed teams of people, and I know you have all managed people, and trying to get my team at the time to finish something, like to finish deploying before they got bored and bought a new shiny toy or came to me with a new shiny toy, was really difficult, because it was like, oh, we've implemented this backup technology or EDR or XDR or whatever it might be. We've done the fun bit, which is the investigation. Now it's being deployed. I've kind of lost interest. I want to run off and play with my new thing. And I think
this is why asset management is broken.
Yeah, I mean, we could debate this topic for hours and hours, and not just the time we've got. But
we could look shiny new object. Look shiny new object, right? I mean, that's the reality. But I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I admit, right? You want to work on the cool stuff, and then you hand off the operational, not cool legacy stuff to people who actually usually are not as skilled, or you think that they like doing that, right? Whatever it happens to be, and that's not exactly the right thing to do.
And then what tends to happen is, instead of looking at the tools you already have in place to see if they can do the new requirement that you have, because you've kind of handed them over and you've given your toy to somebody else to play with, you're like, I've got a use case I need to meet. Let me buy another toy. And actually, in a lot of cases, you could look at tools you've already got. And we're definitely better at that, or vendors are better at that than they used to be. It used to be a case of one tool did one thing very, very well, and everything else that it said it did, not particularly well. Now it's easier for them to do things pretty well, or several things pretty well. But I still think technology people still have it in their brains that I want a new toy. Let me run off and get a new toy.
Yeah, that's what the gift he just did, is run off and gotten a new toy. So maybe he'll come back.
Yeah, so let's start to dive into this topic, because it is one that's very relevant, especially with the SASE framework. You're taking what were previously point products, dissolving them. Previously, point products a lot of times delivered from hardware, dissolving them into software and distributing them across the internet. This consolidates wide area networks, it consolidates security stacks. We mentioned CASB and the joys of CASB. DLP is part of that experience. SWIG, so on and so forth. And there's lots of movement here. And the reasons are I want to reduce my vendor landscape. I want greater visibility. I want to reduce the costs. I don't want to have my high-end engineers be focused on a UI here, here, and here. It starts to make a lot of sense. And as well, it starts to remove that shiny object problem that we have within IT, that I need a new tool just about every other day, and I go to RSA and I come back with a wish list that I really don't need, but I still want those things because they're cool. How are we going to see this play out? Is this just another cycle within IT? Because we go through consolidation phases, and then we go into an explosive. Hey, we're gonna, there's all these new products, and then we consolidate. Is this just one of those cycles, or are we really starting to move toward a full platform approach?
I can go first. I think fundamentally, I don't think it's a cycle per se. I think it's a maturation of the infrastructure that we're dealing with, and I think from a platform perspective, I am hearing from enterprises that they would like to work off single platforms, and to the extent that we now understand what we need from it, right? Because one of the things in terms of applications, as they become more similar in terms of the way you access them, as in terms of the transport protocols and so forth, in terms of the object models, the CRUD, the operations, as they become more similar, then the security tools that protect those things can also collapse in some sense, right? And so I think, given that that's happening, we're all cloud-based, it's all HTTPS or Quick or whatever it is, then I think the platform-wise will see that level of consolidation. And we are tired, and there's a lot of stuff in your VPN that there's those features you don't use anymore. There's a lot of features in the CASB you don't need anymore. And so fundamentally, if I'm going to look at a traffic stream or content stream and do something with it, a lot of those actions were duplicated across all the boxes that you chained previously. And I think it's time to collapse those things. And there's probably 80% of the features we don't need to recreate ever again. And I think that part makes sense. I think forever, we're always going to have new point products because there's going to be new application models, new needs, and those will appear. But I think we'll see more platforms in the near future, next 5 years, from a security perspective than I think before. I think that's just reaction to what enterprises are asking for.
So do you think the rise of the cloud has helped with consolidation?
The cloud definitely has, right? The move to SaaS, the move to IaaS, the move to PaaS, in terms of the similarity in the application development model, in the application access and consumption model, in terms of our data transfer models, I think that has driven it and at least simplified it, because you don't have this diverse set of, my application is built this way. I've got this special new protocol. I don't like Ethernet. I got something, I don't know what, better than Ethernet, right? So you don't have to worry about all those things because there is a standardization that's happened on the application side, on even the content and storage side. And to the extent that that's happened, security can come along and say, you know what, 80% of stuff I did, I don't have to worry about anymore, right? I just focus on what's the most common, right? But there's going to be legacy infrastructure out there.
I mean, if you look at SASE, for instance, it's got a load of point products that were specifically on-prem physical hardware, and therefore they needed to have processing power and memory to churn and storage of data. It would have been hard to really run what is a SASE platform, or even a subset, the SSE platform, in one physical part of tin on-prem, because it would have been 20 years ago, it would have been a whole room. Maybe 10 years ago, it would have been a couple of racks, and maybe 5 years ago, quite a big, hefty server. So I think there's an element of being able to utilize the performance of the cloud to run more things in consolidation, or at least that's the way I see it. But Evgeny?
I want to add to this. I think the perfect example is SSL decryption. We, for the last probably 8 years, we're talking about SSL decryption and the need of SSL decryption. We started with 1K keys, then we moved to 2K keys. Now some have in the 4K keys. So the amount of horsepower, the amount of CPU you need to decrypt so much traffic and decrypt the keys, it's actually quite big. And we always had this problem beside this that, okay, it's December, it's a holiday season, I have more traffic, or it's a tax season, I have more traffic, or whatever the season it is, I have more traffic. So I have to buy whatever the fridge, fire, or whatever I'm buying, it has to be big enough to be able to do this. With the cloud and with the idea of containers and horizontal scaling right now, I don't need to. Not the problem anymore. No, I just buy it and I forget about it. I don't need to upgrade my firewall every 3 years because my internet now changed from 1 gig to 2 gig to 10 gig. I assuming that whatever the provider I'm working with will take care of this. Of course, not always the case. Of course, there's a problems. But the way I see this, the biggest benefits of the cloud, because I'm basically taking a big problem that's not core of my business and give it to somebody else to deal with it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this really speaks to where IT is going, especially in the infrastructure space, because it hasn't been affected in the way that the application level has. Or think about the evolution of email. It was on-prem. We had tons and tons of servers. We managed that. We did all our care and feeding of Exchange. We don't do that anymore. It's
Mhm.
it's all in the
And
cloud. But
to add, to you, quickly interrupt with you, one of the biggest questions and topics that people ask me when we're doing some kind of re-architecture of the network is like, oh, so I don't need to back traffic anymore? Like, no,
yeah,
you don't. Whatever
yeah.
the email or whatever it is.
But one of the topics I want to get into is Microsoft's a great example of this. O365 consolidation of email. Corporations run on it. We've become pretty much the de facto standard is Exchange, maybe Gmail, but there really isn't anything else outside of that. But what have we seen in the news? We've seen attacks on Microsoft, companies' email being, breached, even federal government being breached. It's a single vendor, and if you have a single vendor, it makes it a lot easier for bad actors to get in there and start to leak information. Let's talk a little bit about the downside of this platform approach. If you and one of the challenges with platforms is they are very capital intensive, so it lends itself to bigger companies that really can go out there and buy these startups or build the technology organically within their areas. So you see this consolidation of what you may have a space of 10, 15, what is SASE now? Like 19 different vendors.
Yeah.
This quickly could become a game of 4 or 5 vendors. And then, you kind of start to think about, all right, so who's going to benefit from this? The bad guys, because instead of knowing 19 vendors, they now only need to know 5 or 6, or maybe 2 or 3.
You actually raised something. So earlier on today, I was at a university in the UK, and the university has many campuses and many different facilities, faculty, sorry, and they're all run independently. They have their own IT departments, and they want to consolidate. And this is what we're talking with vendor consolidation, right? This is or product consolidation. Their concern is, at the moment, if one of those areas gets compromised, it's like a little island. Nobody can go anywhere. Yes, there's a risk, and there's a risk in regards to manpower to protect that particular island and resources to protect that particular island and budget to protect that particular island. But the positive thing is, if that island does get compromised, it's just that island. Whereas if you kind of join all those islands together, then somebody has to just attack the one island and they can go everywhere. And that's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about putting all of our eggs in that one basket, right? So that does make the large companies potentially more of a target, the Microsofts of the world, the Googles of the world, the Amazons of the world. And I agree with you, John. I think at the moment, if you are an attacker, and we're not talking attackers like they used to be, we're talking government, state, country run, backed, multiple like individuals, lots of money, lots of resources. You only need to attack one place, and the whole team is attacking one place. So if you relate it to, I don't know, the war, for instance, or a war of any kind, if you are the opposition and you're trying to take over all of those islands, it's going to be harder than if it's one big island. So I definitely, there's an element of negativity around consolidation, but also that one company has potentially more resources, more money, more power, more clever people, more all of those things. So it's a balance, right? I don't know what you think, Roy.
And what if they get acquired also as well?
Yeah.
What's going to happen this? So it's always, you're right. It's an imbalance. Who do we trust with what? This is, I think, where the legal comes in and what's happening. What's the SLAs? What's the obligation? How you prevent and protect yourself. Third-party management, it's really key here. Understanding. We actually was talking yesterday. I have two of my best friends are IP lawyers, and we were talking about patents. If a company claims they have a patent, and let's say you buying the technology because of the patent, and then a year after you understand they actually have a patent that infringe somebody else's patent, like what do you do? For example, they're going to be sued for millions of dollars, and what's going to happen there? So there's a lot of things we need to do outside this to trust. I do think there's opportunity for us to trust the big companies, to trust the approach, but there are steps. Okay, let's have a mature third-party assessment. Let's understand what's happened in case it got acquired. What happened in case it got breached? What is the data they're going to have about us? So with Microsoft, some of my customers now talking about, do I need to encrypt my information even so it's in Microsoft and I have the key in case it's happening? So there are steps on top of the steps I need to do. So I'm removing one problem. I don't need to do RMAs. I don't need to do carrying feeds for my firewalls, for my devices, for my SQL servers, for my servers. But then I'm doing something else to make sure I have some kind of control.
Yeah, I think, fundamentally, I mean, as Evgeny said, it's always a balance. It's always, and I think the decision point is going to be different for different companies, depending on, what your needs are, your specialties, your verticals, amount of money you have, the size of your team, the maturity, expertise in the team, and so on and so forth. So I think the key thing is, as Evgeny said, supply management, right? Process management around your vendors. And it's always this balancing game. The bigger folks, right? Is it more likely for AWS to be breached or your own data center to be breached, right? Probably more likely in an equal attack scenario, your data center is more likely to be breached because maybe you're not as sophisticated, you don't have all the resources that AWS has. At the same time, is AWS a better target because the returns are much better for a nation state? Absolutely, right? Because if you can break it, then you can potentially get through it. Then wow, the spoils are wonderful, and that's going to be this balancing thing. I think fundamentally from a business standpoint, it's a risk management, risk mitigation, sort of TCO balancing thing that you have to do. Do you want one vendor? Do you want two vendors? Can you leverage one vendor's platform, but as Evgeny said, encrypt your information? Maybe I use Box or Dropbox, but I use a third-party encryption above that because I like Box's distribution, I like Box's synchronization, I like Box's storage capabilities and even DR capabilities, but I don't like Box seeing my data, or I don't like Dropbox seeing my data. I'm going to put an encryption layer over and above that, of which the keys I manage. So I think it's just being smart about how you use all these various things, understanding the risk involved. But we should not just default assume that it's secure. We should not default assume that if I'm going with the biggest names, that in fact you're protected, because you're not, and you have to risk mitigate.
Yeah, I'd
Like
like
this. If you have SOC 2 compliance, it doesn't mean you're secure.
no.
You need to
No, that doesn't mean no. SOC 2 doesn't. Yeah, no. I mean that's. I think that people confuse compliance with being secure, right? And that's it's yeah.
I'd like to raise a question around innovation. Does this consolidation somehow reduce innovation? And the way I think of it is, if you've got a lot of medium-sized or small-sized companies in a particular environment, then a new startup that's possibly fighting against those medium to small-sized companies maybe has an opportunity. But if you're a new startup and you're fighting, the only other competition in your market is a Microsoft, for instance, what are you even going to bother? I mean, and yes, I understand you would attempt to fight that battle if you had something completely different and something that was a real wow factor. But if you just look at the email market, for instance, you've got 1-2 choices at most. Everything else is gone, right?
And you have at least 25 vendors in email security that say they can do a better job than Microsoft using API.
Yeah. But at what point do companies really buy these, or they just accept that what Microsoft is doing?
Size. I think if you're a medium, you're gonna just do Microsoft and Google, just realistically, because you have a budget. If you enterprise, then you're probably gonna have an add-on. If you some kind of compliance, or you're really concerned about what's gonna happen there, you're gonna buy an extra solution because it's not gonna be enough.
Yeah, and even I'm seeing some of the small school districts in my area. They'll buy add-on security like on top of their Google workspaces and or Microsoft, because I think one of the things that the APIs now enable on the cloud side of things enables third parties to come in and do the add-ons. No, at least until Google and Microsoft acquire them, right? it's an independent company, but there is still innovation going on. And I think one thing I would say is that, to the extent that there's economies of scale and they can slow down some level of innovation. But what I'm seeing even with the largest companies is that as long as you have 2 or 3 aggressive competitors, you will have innovation, right? If you look at the cloud market with AWS, GCP, Azure, and some of the smaller ones, they are driving innovation at a rapid pace. So I think as long as we have that, I think it'll be okay. It's like hard drive, right? If you look at hard drive, there was Western Digital. I mean, look at the number of Seagate, Western Digital, right? Maybe Toshiba to some extent. They were still driving the cost down and driving innovation because they were fierce competitors. I don't think you want a single, one-player monopoly, but as long as the market dynamics are such as fierce competition, I think there will still be innovation, and there's always rooms. I mean, I live here in Silicon Valley, and there's always a startup around the corner. Everyone has an idea. It's kind of like LA. Everyone wants to be an actor or an actress, and up here, everyone wants to start a company, right? That's the dream.
Yeah, so
And for email security, the moment Gardner will agree with me that email should be part of SASE and SSE, then every such an SSE company going to have an email solution as well.
That may be their exit strategy. That may be the exit strategy for all these email companies is pay off an analyst firm to say, hey, it's now part of SASE or ZTE or whatever the analyst firm is calling it.
Plus.
And there's a run on them.
We'll call it SASE Plus.
No, there is now. Oh, hold on. There is SASE 3.0. It was announced this week by Palo Alto Networks. So
Palo Alto is very good at upping the numbers. Like what's ZTNA 2.0? I'm like, so when do we have 1.0 again? I mean, they're good at that. Anyway,
I missed this 3.0. What is this 3.0?
I think they've added AI into it, so they're getting prepared for RSA.
So
but I digress.
SASE or iSASE, whatever, iSASE, whatever it is.
AI SASE. That would be if Apple entered into the SASE debate, iSASE.
You should do SASE,
but I digress.
With an extra E for email. That's what you should do.
Yeah. There you go.
E for email. SASE.
eSASE, yes.
Yeah. Oh, eSASE.
So I do have a question for you, Gene, because you have a pulse on the startup market. Do you think that the startups or have they already started to become much more niche-y? In the past we saw, companies with grand visions. Hey, we're going to take over this space and morph into the next, I don't know, Cisco, AWS, whatever it may be. But what I've seen kind of in the startup space, and I expect to see this at RSA, is much more of a niche-y approach to solving problems with an idea to be acquired. If you kind of look at where the space is right now in terms of VC funding and exits, we're seeing some really negative exits right now. There was a company that, was valued at, I don't know, almost $2 billion and it went for, I don't know, $200 million. And, round D, round, so on and so forth. Are we going to start seeing these A-round vendors? And that actually happened with Zscaler. They bought an A-round a vendor and had a big announcement around it. Are we going to see more of that in this space where, the companies with the money to acquire, the budgets to acquire, and the visionary aspects of we're going to add on email to SASE? Are we going to see more of that? Startups starting to focus on niche areas where they can just get acquired and that's their exit plan rather than IPO?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I remember going to AWS reInvent in 2015 and 16. and I will go around the show floor and like, hey, this is like not a company. It's like a feature. It's a checkbox. Like, what are you doing here? And I think it was the beginning of companies. Okay, I'm doing something very niche. Okay, not a checkbox, not just a one feature, but something more. But we mentioned innovation as well. We mentioned Palo Alto. It was a bit of a surprise for me for the last 5 years how many companies Palo Alto acquired. We used to talk about Cisco, how many companies Cisco is acquiring, but Zscaler, Palo Alto, and many other bigger vendors now acquiring. I think this is the way for them to do the innovation instead of doing them by themselves. So definitely see the companies want to create a solution, create a more than a feature, an offering that doing something. Let's look on the SPM space, browser security, enterprise browser space. It's basically not one feature. It's a problem they're solving. And in reality, I don't see any of the big vendors going creating them by themselves and not acquiring. Actually, I'm probably going to contradict myself right now because Checkpoint just announced yesterday they released a plugin for browser, but majority of other of them going to probably buy someone and not innovate internally.
I guess for the larger companies, it's probably seen as more cost effective because I guess somebody else has come up with the idea.
Mhm.
Somebody else has pretty much put it into play and more or less proved it. And I think it gives them, and John, you mentioned being at round A and getting acquired. If it looks like it's going to be really successful, that's the best time to buy, right? You get a relatively cheap deal. You don't have to wait until they're a unicorn and then try and acquire. I'd certainly be super interested in what we're going to see at RSA this year, because last year it was zero trust and AI everywhere. I just wonder what it's going to be this year. Is it going to be more of the same? How many vendors that were there last year are either no longer here or have collapsed or have been acquired? And what are the new ideas? I think we've been talking about consolidation all the way through this and platform versus portfolio and all of those things. And I think the cloud came along and the cloud helped us with consolidation. It helped us with that power. It helped us with the unification of how things were developed. We're seeing networking insecurity kind of consolidate. What is left to consolidate? What are the other things that you're never really going to consolidate your backup technology into your network? It just kind of doesn't make sense. And do you know what I mean? I just wondered what else is there that we would want to consolidate that we haven't already done. I mean, there are certain elements of products like email scanning into SSE, and you mentioned that as much as I mentioned pineapple on pizza, because it's a good idea. Or pineapple on pizza is not, but that email in SSE is.
It's good. It's a good idea.
So I don't know. I wondered if there is anything left to consolidate,
Yes.
or is it going to be?
Oh, I think there's a lot of things to
behaviors.
consolidate.
I am.
Yeah.
The entirety of XDR. I think SASE SSE is a perfect example.
How we secure APIs, I think, is another one.
It's
Yes.
it's more likely
party.
SASE and XDR actually.
Yeah.
That
right.
Yeah.
that was
The
a conversation
that's
I was
more
having.
likely.
person or server or host, what's happening with you on the network, on the environment, not in the network.
Yeah, so hybrid cloud security, CSPM, covered
Yeah.
with hybrid. I think So I think it's more likely we'll see SASE with an X DR at the end, SASE, whatever that's pronounced. But
SASE,
XSASE.
oh my.
I mean,
right?
that addresses one of the classic problems that organizations have is agent bloat. How many agents am I going to run on a system? Is it 20? I don't know. Is it 10? Are we going to limit it down to 3?
It'll be consolidated.
That's
that's
debate.
what's going to happen. Yeah. So the inventory, the patch management, right? Your XDR, endpoints. That's one area, right, for consolidation. I mean, that's not done, right? I mean, I think there's still plenty of fun things that we'll see, and there's always new players. Like Wiz Security that grew rapidly. I mean, dramatically, right? And so
now they're
always
in
room.
They're in their acquisition phase. They're out buying companies.
That's right.
Who knows? Maybe there's an announcement coming next week. I suspect someone's going to have an announcement of an acquisition next week. I would lay money on that one. All right, so we're kind of wrapping up here, getting down to the takeaways. So if you are a IT manager, director, whatever it is that your role is, how should you be thinking about this debate? and how should you also protect yourself so you don't get into a situation like many of us are dealing with the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom, where we're not going to see a lot of innovation in that space, and maybe that space is unique because it is mature, it's been out there for a while, but you can see the same sort of thing happening in the security space long term if you kind of run the timeline out there. But what are some of the things you should be thinking about in terms of this debate? Should you maintain a best of breed? Should you go to a more modular approach, or should you just dive all in on platforms?
Yes, I would say here, unfortunately, in the security space, there's a lack of sort of APIs and standardization. So you can't really easily say, look, I'll give a platform and I can pick and choose the other modules that go in there from multiple vendors, because we never got there. There is no incentive to do that, right? The biggest players of the world, Checkpoints, Palo Alto, the Ciscos, and to the extent they want you on their platform, and they have no incentive to play well with others, generally speaking. And so, I mean, given that scenario, I think, from a sort of if a mid-sized company and you're the director of IT, I think fundamentally the way to look at it is, you should probably end up buying into a platform, and that based on what your specific needs are, because there is an operational cost to maintaining all the disparate systems out there. And I think, unfortunately, you have to pick one. There is no right answer, right? It's any one of those large ones are probably reasonable. They all have their CVEs and breaches. And reality is not one platform anyway. They're all a bunch of acquisitions that hopefully get consolidated and organized faster than not, right? So I think the speed of how they consume that acquisition and digest it, I think that's going to be one of the key factors in there. There's always room for other parallel products, because the reality is one platform can't do it all. And so I think there's going to be a mix of platform, I think, as a fundamental decision, and then the couple elements around that platform that give you that flexibility. But I think more important than that, I think going forward, is understanding your policies, understanding how you're going to do automation, understanding your playbook. I think having agility in your security team is much more important, so that when events happen that you don't expect, like for instance, your platform blows up, or your platform vendor is not appropriate, or something bad happens, that you have the ability to move quickly, because you understand what your security posture ought to be, your policies ought to be, and you have some level of automation that insulates you from the underlying platform. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
I think we covered pretty much majority of the topics I wanted to cover.
I'm talking off a Givney's list here, right here. I have your talking point.
You got his
Sorry,
notes.
I went into your bullets. Sorry, I'll back off. All
good. One part I want to add is, in the end of the day, we cannot predict the future. Understand the business needs of the company. Don't, as you mentioned, don't buy tools because they're sexy, because they're cool. Buy tools that help the business. Have a bit of a mind to say, okay, we already know that potentially something may happen in the future, like somebody going to backwire someone. Do I am going all in, or there's a way for me to back off and change the direction to left and right? So just think about this part. Do your third party due diligence. Enjoy the day.
I think for me, always investigate the tools you already have in play. Is there anything more I can do with the tools I've already got, or with the vendor that owns those tools? So that should, for me, that's kind of the first step. If you already have product, and that product can do more, or that vendor can do more, maybe that's because there's power in buying multiple tools from the same vendor. But also, to do that, you need a roadmap, because what it might be is, maybe today tool A doesn't do any more, so look at tool B. But what else can tool B do that may be on your roadmap? Because otherwise you'll go, tool A, that doesn't fit my need, I'll buy tool B, and then a year later you're buying tool C. So when you're looking at your next tool, what else on your roadmap, or within your business requirements, or within your vision, could that tool potentially do? So that over time you get rid of that long tail, right? That you end up with less and less.
Yep.
And that's easier said than done. Evgeny?
I have an idea for a future show. Open source platforms versus not open source platforms. Do I use them inside the enterprise, or I don't use them?
That. In security, I wish we had more open source, and we invested more in open source. That is an important element. I mean, like computing.
Well, we do. I mean, a lot of these tools are based on open source, and then
Yeah.
we wrap them with special with tape and,
License.
and
Yeah,
color them in
special
different areas. But a lot of it is based on open
That's
source.
true. IP firewalls, Snot,
Yep.
right? A lot of those that we,
Yeah.
Bro, right? I mean,
Yeah.
OS query on the device
Yep.
side, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
We have
That
some
might be
questions.
a great
Yeah.
topic. All right, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you at RSA in San Francisco next week. It's going to be a fun time. And folks out there, if you are listening and you are attending RSA, feel free to reach out. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Keep in mind, we've got our fundraiser with the amazing Dr. Zero Trust, Chase Cunningham. He will be in full regalia on Wednesday. I believe the timing is around 11 to say 1 o'clock. He will be out patrolling the floors of the Moscone, fighting cyber crime and raising awareness of Zero Trust. So it's a great cause, fundraiser, great raising awareness of Zero Trust, also supporting our veterans. So reach out to us, say hi to Chase and the team, and help us out to support our veterans by giving us a donation. So thank you guys. Incredible show here. Great insights. Roy, you brought it hard, man. I appreciate everything you said.
I was just reading off a Gaffney script. That's all. So, thank you.
Thank you,
All
guys.
right.
See you next
Thank
week.
you. See you next week,
See ya.
guys.
See ya. Bye.